So there's how the cathedral is built. It's a cross. And you remember, the cross is an X that marks the center of the world, and the cross is the place where each individual is. And I think that's the fundamental message of Christianity, is the cross marks the place where every single individual is. And it's a tragic place that consists of suffering and exposure to malevolence, and that the only way to come to terms with it is to accept it. And that seems to me, I don't see anything metaphysical about that statement whatsoever. It's like, well, X marks the spot, fair enough. You're in a spot, you're right in the center of your world, it's right in the center of the world as far as you're concerned, and the same with the rest of us. It's characterized by suffering and exposure to malevolence, there's no doubt about that. What are you going to do about that? Bitter, resentful, hateful, all that does is make it worse. So you have to accept it. Now that's not an easy thing, because that's actually, I would say, a heroic task to voluntarily accept the conditions of your own existence. And that happens at the cross. So that's fine. And that's associated with light. Well, that's good that that's associated with light. You wouldn't want that to be associated with darkness. That would be a bad thing. So there's the labyrinth. That was built in 1200 AD. And so the idea is you walk in here. It's the same idea as that star sequence of slides that I just showed you. So here's the idea, is that north, south, west, and east. So that's the whole world laid out in 2 dimensions. And so the question is, how do you get to the center? Now, we already know what the center is. The center is the center of the cross. That's the place of maximal suffering. You could say maximal malevolence as well. But it's also the place where that's transcended. So how do you get there? Well, the answer is, well, you don't just stand on the outside looking in. That's not going to help. So, and you can't just run right to the center, even if you're in California. And so you have to walk in here, and then you see, you go like this, and you go to every single place on that little cosmos. And then once you've gone to every single place and expanded yourself as a consequence of going north and west and east and south, then there's enough of you so that you can tolerate being, first of all, that you can figure out where the center is, but also that you can tolerate being at the center. And so that's what that represents. That's pretty, and look, I mean, let's make no mistake about it, hey? People were pretty damn serious about those ideas. Like that's quite the piece of work for people in the 12th century. You know, some of those damn cathedrals took 300 years to build. We don't build anything that takes 300 years. You know, people were putting a lot of effort into whatever these things meant. You know, and if you think they meant bearded man in the sky, then, you know, it's hard to account for the kind of motivation that would produce these buildings with that kind of paucity of conceptualization. You know, the towns, and it was certainly the case in Chartres, is that they groaned under the tax burden that was required to produce these. Now, you might think, well, that's partly tyrannical, and no doubt that's the case, but that's not the whole story. The whole story is that the people who produced those buildings, they thought about every bit of it. Nothing's accidental. And they're trying to portray something, just like that window is trying to portray something. That's the same thing as this. It's the center from which all things manifest themselves. You see, that's Christ there, and being portrayed as that center, or the center within him, something like that. Very much like the chakras in yogic practice. Same basic idea. It's the opening up of the internal structure and its proper realization. So there are people walking the labyrinth. So that's the coat of many colors, right? That's this differentiated mode of being that enables you to be competent and at home in the widest possible number of places. And that's a real differentiation of your personality. It's a breaking through the boundaries of your personality, including the ones that you impose on yourself, to become someone who's useful wherever they're put.